Well, hey everyone, today I'm in the studio with Pastor Scott, and we're talking about sort of organizing your church for a discipleship culture. So Scott, you are, the first pastor to really try to bring this into your church structure. So this will be good for pastors, elder boards, small churches, new churches, maybe even big churches. So how do you think about organizing your staff, your volunteer teams, all that stuff?
Well, I think if you're the lead pastor of your church, lead pastor, senior pastor, planting pastor, campus pastor, I think it's really important to think of all of your ministries within the context of a discipleship culture, because your job is ultimately to lead the discipleship culture. And so what we've tried to do is structure the lead pastor position around 5 roles, the senior pastor position, whatever, around 5 roles. And those roles really help us execute a discipleship culture. And you can see them on the screen, so let me walk you through them real quickly. You've got the role of assimilation, and assimilation refers to how do you get somebody either to your church or into the doors of your church or into your small group ministry, whatever that is for your church. How do you get them connected to your ministry, and then how do you help them move from a guest to kind of being really part of your ministry and help them to grow and develop? So you can think of it as how do you get them in the front door, and then how do you sort of close off the back door so that they can become part of the family. Then you have the gateway service, which is, we tend to think of that as like the worship service, and so all that goes into pulling off worship services, not just stuff that happens on the stage, all the tech stuff that goes on, but even ushers and greeters, and just the general environment. And then we've got ministry teams. And as you can see, these roles are not all equal, because like this ministry team's role, this is a really heavy role. It includes a lot of stuff: kids, youth, we call that our fusion youth group, college, young professional, women's ministry, men's ministry, small groups, individual mentors, outreach. So a lot of the heart of the discipleship culture is found in the ministry teams. Then we've got operations and facilities. So if you have your own building, if you're renting a facility, there's a lot of ministry work that goes on there. And then lastly, pastoral care, which is everything from hospitality to hospital visits to all the pastoral work that we get to do as pastors. And we think of those as the 5 big roles of the lead pastor job.
All right, Scott, we'll take a look at that again in just a second. Let me just stop and let you breathe for a second and tell me, how does mentoring fit into those 5 major areas of ministry?
Well, in a lot of ways, and that's a really good question. And it's important to understand that your role as a lead pastor, your role is the overall discipleship mentoring culture. And so mentoring really fits into every single one of those roles, because even roles like facilities roles or gateway service roles like running a soundboard, we want to see a mentoring culture be among the people who are doing those jobs and doing those activities and part of those teams.
Okay, so let's just take an example. Worship team. I'm a volunteer worship leader in the church, and you tell me, hey, you're not just a worship leader, you're also a mentor for your worship team. What would that look like for me on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis?
Yeah, and so that's a good example. So for a worship team, one of the minimum things that you can do, or one of the beginning things that you can do to develop mentoring on your worship team, if you're a worship leader, is to take the first 15 minutes of your rehearsal time, practice time, and go through a mentoring conversation. And it could be a worship conversation, but it doesn't have to be. It could be anything from the library, really, and just really say, we're going to take 15 minutes. If you have more time, that's great, but a lot of our people are busy. They don't have a ton of time. So take time to, watch a video, talk about a video, and pray. And just say, we're going to do that every time. And we're going to do it at the beginning. We're not going to do it at the end, because if you do it at the end, you're not going to do it. So we do it at the beginning. And then from there, if you're the worship leader, begin to look at opportunities, using all your mentoring skills that you have and all the training that you have to begin to look and see, okay, who are individuals on my team who need individual mentoring training? But the best way to get it into your team is just through those little 15-minute, half-hour conversations. And really, that's just an example from worship teams, but a lot of teams can work that same way.
Yeah, so let me throw another one at you. Okay, I'm a pastor of a smaller church, and I've got my elder team. So, and I've got 3 elders that are small group leaders also, or whatever. How do I bring a mentoring relationship to my elders, and maybe even to my elder meetings? Is that how you would do it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if our elders don't understand mentoring and what a discipleship culture really is, then the rest of the church isn't going to. And so I'd say that you would run your elder meetings, and this is what we do is we run them, start them off with a conversation from the library, and we have different people lead it. I wouldn't just you always lead it. I'd have other people lead it. I let them choose the material from time to time, and again, put that at the beginning of your meeting. Because if you put it at the end of the meeting, you're never gonna get to it.
Now, I can hear some people saying, hey, we're busy. We got things to do. We got a church to run. Like, we don't have time for these mentoring conversations. How would you respond to that? As someone who's probably in that place, I'm sure you're tempted to do that too.
Yeah, I'm certainly tempted to do that, and I've done that. And I'll be honest, none of us are perfect, and so we've done that. We've blown the mentoring piece from time to time. We've become task oriented, and I do have staff members and I have leaders that say, I'm too busy. I don't have time for this mentoring thing. And I've just told our leaders, you will never get in trouble for erring on the side of mentoring. In other words, if our gateway service slips a little bit, but it's because we focused on mentoring, that's okay. No one's ever going to get in trouble for that. Where we'll get in trouble, I mean, that sounds kind of like a weird way to say it, I guess, but where we're going to have problems is if our leaders avoid discipleship and mentoring for the sake of tasks or for the sake of making sure things look a certain way on a Sunday morning. Now, we want to set it up that we can do everything we need to do. We want to have a good welcoming environment, a good Sunday worship experience. We want to have nice hot coffee on Sundays for our visitors, but we're going to err on the side of a mentoring culture.
Well, let's take a look at that chart one more time. So, Scott, tell us again, which one of these would you say is maybe the most important, really, especially getting started?
That's a great question, and I'd say, without a doubt, the most important role, especially when you're starting out, is ministry teams. And I know there's a sense in which these are all ministry teams, but that middle column that involves our mentoring, our small groups, our individual mentors, our marriage mentors, our kids, our youth, if we don't have mentoring there, if we don't have a discipleship culture there, then we're not going to have a discipleship culture anywhere else. And really, we can build up those other four roles, but if we don't have a discipleship culture as the heartbeat behind that, then our church is going to just not work the right way. It's not going to work like we want it to in a Pursue God format. And so I really believe that our role as pastors is to make sure that we have really healthy ministry teams. Now, I know this is a really big list, not just ministry teams, but all these lists. These are a lot of teams. And I would say this is what we do in our larger campuses. We have all these teams. A smaller campus, a church plant, a smaller church is probably not going to need all these teams. Or you can kind of combine some teams because of the size of your church, and that's okay. But the key is to really think through what are the ministries of your church, what are the teams of your church, and how can you really set them up to grow in a discipleship culture?
Now, Scott, that looks like a lot of work. I'm sure as the church grows, you know this, as the church grows, it just gets more and more and more overwhelming, to think about running all those teams. What would you say to that pastor? Even in a small church, he might feel that way. What would you say to that guy?
Absolutely. And that is overwhelming. If you look at that chart and you're like, I have to do all those roles, I have to be the person that oversees all those ministries, that is too much. That is too much work. And that's not the intent. The intent is that as you mentor your elders, other capable leaders in your church, that you put them in charge of these different areas of ministry so that you have one person or two people who are in charge of assimilation or who are in charge of ministry teams or in charge of the gateway service. Now, maybe right now, especially if you're transitioning into a discipleship culture, you might be the person who's running most of these overarching ministries. I hope you're not the person that's also running all these ministry teams, but the goal is to raise up people in your church who understand how to do the work of the ministry and who understand a discipleship culture and to help them lead and oversee in these areas. And then you're sort of like a coach, overseeing, making sure that the discipleship culture is happening.
All right, so then that's why mentoring is so important. That's why doing it in a mentoring sort of a format, instead of just saying, everybody here, you do this and you do this, you do this. You as a lead pastor are strategically mentoring the right people and releasing them to mentor the people on the rest of that org chart.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's just so critical, like you said, that you understand what mentoring is and you're doing it and you're practicing it in the elder teams. We've tried in the past we've said, like, we've told people go and mentor your teams when we haven't mentored them well or for long enough, and we paid the price and we had to start over. And so you have to model that. And the sooner you start modeling that, the more you can begin to realize this chart.
And you can model that with this conversation. So pastors, leaders, if you're bringing an elder board through this or some of your ministry team leaders through this video, That's perfect. We'll put questions below so that you can process this a little bit more. Now, I know this is a longer video than most of our videos because it's a leadership video, but you can still use this video to begin mentoring people, give them clarity on, I see how it works now. And we'll also add some other videos below to help you to know which topics to cover next.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a lot of resources and there's a lot of ways to approach how to raise up leaders and how to handle leaders and how to empower them. So,
Yeah.
that's
So
one more.
we'll put links to all of those topics and some other maybe subtopics for leaders below this video, along with some questions. So have this conversation with your leadership teams and keep really sort of moving everyone forward to help the whole church pursue God.